This video is a demonstration on how to remove the keys on the Yamaha KX88 Master MIDI keyboard. For those of you who are not familiar with it, the KX88 does not generate sound. It sends MIDI signals out to other instruments like the DX7 and Untitled, all those others. And in this particular keyboard, I just got it shipped to me through a Guitar Center from California. And when it came to my local Guitar Center, it was bent here and some of the keys were sticking, and it looks like it was dropped on the corner. You can see a little damage on there, and it bent it in. So the ad said it was pristine, which it is. There's just some superficial scratches. So they gave me a good break because it was damaged and I was able to fix it. So I'm happy. It's not pristine, but I got a very good price because the manager there, I like Guitar Center. They're really good. At least mine is. So let's get into how to open up the KX88. The first thing you want to do is remove your power cable, because we're going to be lifting this up on end. And if you forget to remove your power cable, you're going to crush it, and you can damage the cable or the connector back there, which I'm not going to show you. And also, we don't want power on while we're removing this. So the first thing to do is, you see these 4 screws over there and over there. Like the DX7 would have a 5th screw on the other side where it's power switch. The KX88's power switch is down here. So on the DX, it's easy. 4 screws and the 5th screw, and this whole panel lifts up on a nice hinge. As you know, the X series from Yamaha were built like tanks, pretty much all metal frame, except for a big heavy wooden plate underneath. But yeah, this thing weighs about 60 pounds, and that's mainly because it's weighted keys. This feels just like a grand piano. The action on this and the feel is just beautiful. And so let's get into that. So we're not going to remove those screws yet, those 4 screws, but what we're going to do is we're going to tip this up on end very carefully. Okay? And you don't want to push it back too far. All right? And it kind of balances itself, but you're going to hold it. Now, if you're just going to open up the panel and you're not going to take out the keys for servicing, there are 2 screws on this side which screw into the wheel plate, and there's 1 far screw that screws into the end plate down by the upper key. Those are the 3 screws that you need to remove just in order to open the plate, because the panel is because they, on a KX88, they sock down the top panel, main panel, by using these screws underneath. So it's a little extra step from the DX7. You don't have to get under the DX7 to open it at all. But I guess they did this for extra safety because it is a fairly long panel. So they wanted to secure it down at this end. So you have to remove these 2 screws, the 2 most left screws, and the 1 rightmost screw. Okay? Bear with me. Okay, so we removed that screw. You probably can't see it on the video, but it's all the way down to the very last screw at the top. And they're machine screws, so they're pretty easy to work. Okay, and you set those aside. And now you're ready to remove the 4 top screws. Okay, now when I remove these 4 top screws, the whole panel is going to lift up, and you pretty much got access. But in this video, since we're going to be taking out the keyboard to service the keys, yes, on a DX7 you don't need to remove the keyboard. The keys slide out. But on the KX, the front rail here doesn't give you enough room to slide the keys out. You'll see later. And you know, I had a hell of a time figuring that out, because I had to pry this to fix some of the keys that were stuck. And I realized that wasn't the problem, you know, I mean, for getting the keys out, because the keys were very hard to get out. They were getting caught on the felt. And it turned out that you need to remove the keyboard to do that. So far, if you just want to open it up, remove those 3 screws I showed you, remove these 4 screws, and then the whole thing just lifts right up on its hinge. But we're going to skip that for now because I want to keep this from flopping down while I remove since we're removing the keyboard, now you can remove the other 5 screws. All right, now, again, those other 5 screws are only needed if you're going to be removing the keyboard inside for servicing. So once you remove the 2 under screws, now we can remove the 4 top screws. I mean the 3 under screws. Now you can remove the 4 top screws, and that takes just a couple seconds. Put everything aside. And I recommend, if you have an old egg carton, you know, like you get with eggs, all the little compartments, and you can put your screws in the egg compartments so you can keep them sorted. That's a little trick. I'm not doing that. I'm just keeping them. I'm here down in the game room / studio today, and I put it on the floor because it's just easier for me to work with this on the floor rather than working on the table. I can work on the table just over a bench, you know. I didn't want to work on a stand or anything like that. So 2 screws under there, 1 screw under there, 4 screws on the top. Grab it in the center with 2 thumbs carefully, and it'll lift right up, right on its hinge. Just like all the X series, they're beautiful. And of course you're unplugged, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, there are some connectors you have to remove, but before we remove the connectors, let's talk about what's now holding the keyboard. There's 3 brackets over here with 3 screws each. And I'm going to move the camera momentarily to show you those screws. See down there? 3 screws, 3 more screws, and right there, 3 screws there, and 3 screws there. So those are the screws I'm going to be removing. And from my point of view, it's almost blind. I mean, I can reach, look over. Doesn't matter what order you remove them. But it's interesting why they use 3 screws. Of each bank of 3, the center screw is actually a wood screw. Because remember, this base has got this electric shield, RF shield, and that is just wood under there. It's like a fiberboard wood. All right, so I'm going to remove the center screw. Is a wood screw. It doesn't matter what order you take them off, but when you put this back in, I'm going to show you, you need to put the wood screws in first, because that aligns the keyboard left to right and front to back. So when you put this back in, the keyboard is right where it was when you took it out, otherwise it'll bind or something like that. So the center screw of each of these clamps or whatever is a wood screw. The other 2 screws are just machine screws that really hold it down. The wood screws do not hold it in place. They're just there for alignment, and you don't need to make those tight when you put this back together. But the machine screws that come out, as you can see, see, wood screw, machine screw, wood, machine. The wood screw's going first, so you can align it. So we're going to remove all 9 of these screws, 3 on each clamp. And again, power should be unplugged, so you're not worried about getting any zapped or anything like that. All right, so now that all 9 screws are out and the 5 underneath, we can go to the next step, and that is lifting this up. But before we do that, we need to remove, and I'm going to temporarily move this over to here so you can see what I'm removing. It's hard when you don't have a cameraman. So first we're going to, on these connectors, we're just going to hold the board underneath gently and then wiggle these off. And then on this little black hook down here, you need to take the harness. You might have to flex it up a little bit. And make sure you get the harness above the hook, completely above all the wires, above the hook. And that's going to give us the slack we need. Like I said, there should be a connector here, but Yamaha didn't put them in. I'm probably putting a connector in, because if you can do this and we take off the other cables, everything is going to just come out really nice and clean. Also, I recommend an ESD wrist strap, grounded. Static electricity, I know what I'm doing. I know I always touch ground or something, but you don't want static electricity from your body to kill any electronics. So whenever you're touching electronics, like I was touching the circuit board, you really should ground yourself with an ESD wrist strap. If you don't know about ESD, learn about electrostatic discharge. The thing about that is You know, electronic circuits are very sensitive to static electricity. And even right now, there's probably a couple hundred volts on my body, you know, until I ground it. If this was plugged in or somehow, you know, grounded somewhere. And you can't feel a zap of 100 volts when you touch ground. You know, it's thousands of volts when you get that little, you know, spark when someone hits you behind the ear with static walking across the carpet. That'll definitely destroy it. But even the static electricity, just moving your body around, builds up static charge, and that can damage things. So whenever you're working on electronic components or touching electronic components, you really should have an ESD wrist strap. I didn't have one on me, but I just kind of touched ground before I touched anything. I'm going to show you how to remove those cables. So let's put the camera back. Here's the delicate part. Also, I forgot to tell you, you're going to need a nice towel, cotton towel that'll reach the full length of the keyboard. Don't use your wife's good towels. She'll kill you. Use an old, what I call shop towel, because you could get grease on it because there is greasing in the keys. So I'm going to show you how to use the towel a little bit. You could use a towel now if you want, but I'm not too worried about gently lifting this up and putting the keys face down like that. And that'll pretty much stay solid for you. So these are the two keyboard keys, keyboard cables. And they're the standard. If you look, it's kind of hard to see, but there's two little plastic wings here on the side. You push those sideways, and they're ejectors. You push those to the side this way, and the connector pops right out. And there's a key slot here, so it can only go in one way. And this one, the same thing. You push the two wings out this way, the two clamps, and they're ejectors at the same time, and that pops right out. Isn't that beautiful? Before you could take out the keys, there's this little strip here of plastic. It's a retainer. You can see that each of the key ends clip onto this retainer. This keeps the keys from sliding forward so they can't fall out while you're playing it. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws. 6 screws. And if you look carefully, these are widely spaced, and these two are a little narrow spaced. They did that so it can only go in one way. And if you have this plastic flipped the wrong way, the screws won't line up. So this plastic strip only goes in one way. And they did that because they want to be sure that you get the right alignment. So we're going to carefully remove these screws. Again, you might want to support this. It's pretty sturdy. Like I said, if you wanted to put a towel under there, I'm not too worried about damaging the key fronts here because, you know, I know I'm just being careful with it, but some purists may say, oh, no, you could scratch the keys. I guess you could, but I haven't done that yet. So I'm being careful. I'm not sliding it. I pick it up carefully. All right, just a couple more screws. And Leslie. I don't have my glasses. I put my glasses up, so it's a little hard for me to see. You know, and if any of these screws, you don't want to really reef them down, sock them down tight. You want a firm, you know, torque on them. Now, after those screws are removed, this little strip slides right out. See that? Slides right out. And remember, it only goes in one way, so make a note of that. Otherwise, you'll be sitting there farting with it. You know, you got to try the 4 different ways until it goes in. It'll only go in one way. You can't even flip it this way because the screws won't line up. And you can't do it that way because the screws won't line up. You can't do it that way. There's only one way it goes in, and that's it. So we're going to take that. We're going to put that aside. Now, the funny part. Like I said, I'm definitely going to put a connector on the aftertouch wires because this should just come right out, and then you can put it on a bench and you can move it around and not have to worry about breaking wires. It's very rare that I have any kind of criticism on how the Yamaha engineers did something, but they are good, and I'm sure there's a reason why they didn't put a connector on there. Not just for price. You know, in the automotive industry, they try to save every penny they can. Yamaha, they try, they do their best, and I think they make great products for the prices. So what we're going to do now is we're going to very carefully pick this up, rotate it, and rest it on the towel. But we want to get it over the towel. See, you'll feel a lip under here. Okay? All right, now you can see we're not pulling on this very much. There's some tension on it. All right. Remember, we had to remove the hook over there. So again, there was a hook over here with the harness. You got to make sure this harness is out from underneath the black hook. And then you need to remove those two connectors over there. Like I said, if there was a connector here, this whole keyboard would come out and be a lot easier to work with. All right, so at this point, now we're ready for what I call the tedious part, and that is removing the keys. Don't ever try to remove the keys. I tried to do that without taking out the keyboard. The keys will push up against this rail, this metal front panel, and you won't be able to get them out without a lot of work. And if you pull up on this, you can destroy this felt underneath. What we do is we pull forward, lift up, pull out the knuckle too. There we go. And then you lift up, you'll feel the spring, and then you can work that around. Sometimes it gets caught on this thing. And there's your spring. And I'm going to show you how that works later. And the black, I don't know what that black paint is. It doesn't really matter which way you put them in, but I think the black paint is for reference, so you know, because the springs do get a little bit of memory over time. You might see a slight bend in them. You can bend them a little straighter if you want. But anyway, that's the spring. That's the counterweight. This is the key. And you could wipe this down, clean it off, except in this area. In this area where the knuckle is, what I fell off, the knuckle has a lubricant, and it's a special lubricant. You don't want to use Vaseline. Go to your Yamaha, go to the Yamaha site. I don't have the part number, but there's a good lubricant that you can use for that, because some lubricants will actually eat through the plastic. But this lubricant is really not so much to lubricate it, but it's to give it that soft feel like a real piano. That's what gives this the weighted key. And there's the weight you can see. So it feels like they're wooden keys with plastic on top, but no, they're just plastic hollow keys with a nice counterweight, which is why this thing weighs so much. And this knuckle on the end, which has a really smooth movement. All right. And you want to keep those aside. I kind of leave them in here and I'll wipe that up. So that's how you remove a key, at least a white key. Now you can't remove a black key. If you need to get to a black key, you have to remove the other white key that surrounds it. So we're going to remove that next. Slide it, lift it up, pull out the knuckle, lift up. You'll hear the spring, pull up, and I drop the, this is where a magnet would come in handy. And you don't want that spring to fall anywhere in here. See, I didn't bring a magnet with me. I should have had a magnet. So have a magnet too. All right. And I recommend you keep your springs, if you're taking out many keys, you know, mark them or something, put them on a piece of paper. And again, you want the black side up. Get a little paint the black side up so you can orientate the springs. So, all right. And again, inspect the spring. It should be pretty straight. Great. You put that one aside. Oh, another thing is they're marked up here. So it says B. So you know this is the B key. And this one is marked A prime or A apostrophe. That's because that's the A on the far end. All the black keys are the same. And this one's marked C. This one's marked D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So they mark it so where it goes on the actual keyboard, because every key is a little different. But I like to keep them in the same octave too. I wish they'd mark the octave numbers, but that didn't make sense. So if you want somewhere, you can mark the octave number 1, 2, 3, however you want to do that. So anyway, I removed the two white keys. You got to be careful. I'm going to show you that in a close-up after we get this going here. Now, the black keys are even easier to remove. You just slide them forward again. There's a little more force tension on them. And then you slide it forward to remove. So it's back, up, forward. And you can remove its knuckle. And there's the spring with the black side. And again, the black keys aren't marked because they're all exactly the same. Now, I'm going to give you a close-up of what we're looking at here, because this is a little different from the DX7. This is the most critical part is because these switches right here, I'm not even going to push down on them, are the switches that tell the KX88 hardware that you're pressing a key and how fast or how much velocity, force you've pressed the key. There are two contacts in there, and right now the switch is up. The key is up. When the switch gets pushed down, that switch breaks, and then a short time later, it makes connection with another connector below it, another contact, and that's the break. It's a break and make. And the KX, just like the DX7, measures the time between the break and the make, with some debounce, because, switches are noisy when they break and make, and they debounce that, but they calculate the time between the two, this distance, and that's how it knows how quickly you've pressed the key down. Very clever. It's timing the distance between the break and the make. And that is done by this little piece here, which pushes down on that little switch. These switches are very, very delicate. Oops, sorry, it would be like this. And I believe I was showing you the knuckles earlier. I should have showed you when the knuckle is, it should be, the knuckles are like this, with this little notch face down when they rotate. Because that notch is where that strip that we removed earlier will retain the keys from keep slipping. That's what that notch is for. But you see, it's still very smooth moving. So anyway, this little piece of tab here presses down on the keys, and between the break and the make, the time it takes for the two switches to make contact, break and make, is how it knows how fast you're pressing the key. This pad here is the aftertouch. As you know, with the X series, you could push a key, and then after you push it, you can push on a little harder with different force. And this pad detects that aftertouch force, so you can play like modulation, like bing, which you can't do on a piano. Some keyboards in the industry have a separate channel for every aftertouch. Yamaha does the full aftertouch as one strip, so it doesn't matter if you do two keys at once. It's the force together, not individual key force. It's the force together that ends up being the aftertouch force. So it's what we call common aftertouch, not individual. MIDI supports both, but that would have made this thing really more expensive with all the inputs that the processor would have to look at for each aftertouch. So they went with this, which is nice because a lot of keyboards don't even have aftertouch, especially your cheaper ones. So this has got key velocity sensitivity, so you can play it like a grand piano, soft and hard, piano forte, pianissimo, fortissimo. See, not good. I just slipped that down like an idiot. All right. Oops. Let's get this back. That's why I hate doing this, because in this video, I had this over the hook here, so it really hooked the keyboard down. But then you can't press on the black keys when I'm going to have to show you. So when you put this up on your towel, put this U section right on top of your towel. Don't hook it over like I had before, which was safer. I wish that, what you could do is, if you really wanted to, you could take your wood screw and put 3 wood screws temporarily down there, and that would lock this in place. And there's no screws there. But that would be nice, because then this wouldn't slide down. Of course, there'd be 3 holes in there, but you wouldn't see them once you put it back together. So that's a solution where these 3 brackets are, where you took the 6 screws. You could theoretically put a little screw there. But like I said, I'm going to take the connector out, and then I'll put a connector on this right here, so this whole thing comes right out. So anyway, getting back to... so that's the aftertouch, and those are the switches. These switches are very, very delicate. Okay? Now, what the problem with this is, of course, the black would be down when we're doing this, because it would be up on the key, right? So when we put it down, the black end of the spring fits right into this little slot, and it's kind of sloppy. I never really liked that, and it could slip, but but the problem is, look at that. That spring is right next to the switch, and sometimes when you're trying to get the key, and this flips up and slips down under there. Now, when the spring slips under there, don't lift up on the spring, because you're going to push down on the switch. Pull the spring gently out. And you're going to need a magnet too. That's another thing you should have, is a magnet, because if the spring drops down in here, excuse me, especially between keys, the magnet is an easy way to get it out. So you're being very careful, because I'll show you with the thing here. These switches are very, very delicate, and if you bend them, you could be into some serious trouble. You could, in some cases, bend them back with a little hook, or you might have to take the whole keyboard out and flip it over and work the switches. And if you break a switch, they're hard to come by. And the thing is, if you bend the switch, the key may still work, but you're going to find out that now the switch is misaligned to the nub on the key here, and you're going to say, wow, this key plays beautifully, soft to loud, but the key next to it is like, even when it's soft, it plays loud. And that's because you bent the switch, and the switch is breaking and making contact a lot quicker because you've bent things, and that's going to affect it. And you can even get it to a point where the key is always playing or it never plays. Another thing to remember this now, when you're putting the key back in, in case I forget, if you hear a clicking, you can hear a little action, but not a click, 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 a tiny click. If you hear a click when your key is, either your spring is not doing something, or this switch is misaligned and this little plastic thing is hitting up against the switch and you're hearing a little click. It's softer than that, but there's a little tiny click. The key should be very smooth and almost silent when you press it. Okay? That's going to make a sound because you're going to hear it up against the felts. When you push it down and it makes a click, tiny, tiny click sound, take the key off and reinstall it, because either the spring or the switch got misaligned. So I can't stress enough, if you are not comfortable with mechanics and fine detail and working with something that's a little tedious and has a good potential of breaking something very delicate, this is not a task for you. All right, so I think I've gone into all the things I want to do. So let's talk about installing a key. Well, remember, we had to take the two white keys to get the black key off, so now we got to install the black key in first before we install the two white keys. Now you're going to look here, there might be a slight bend in that. All right, these do get bent a little bit, especially when you try to put them back in. So try to carefully, teach it, train it to go. Don't bend it too much. You don't want to kink these. You kink them too much, they're going to break. All right, they should be pretty flat. That's pretty flat. All right, that's a delicate touch. And remember, because we're face up when we're putting it in the key, you want the black part face down. So sometimes it's easier to put the key, the spring in first, and then underneath this little tab here, there's a hole. See? And then there's a slide. I don't know if you can see it, but the slide here. And the spring gets caught on that slide. So sometimes when you're putting it in, it's caught. And then as you actually hear a snap, that's nothing damaging. That's just the spring getting back in the position. And there's a little window here on all the keys that you can see that the spring actually made it up to its final position. If you don't hear that snap and you push this, you can bend the spring and you'll feel it very quickly, because then it won't snap back. So you're trying not to bend the spring, but at the same time you're trying to get it to slide on that little slide. See how I'm going like that? It slides in. So there's a lot of action, a lot of compound action going on here. So one way is to make sure you put it, again, black side down in the slot. Don't touch the key. Stay away from don't touch the switch. Stay away from the switch. You see that little slot there? Your hole for the key, the hole for the spring is just above that. And you work and you feel it, okay? And you kind of hold the spring in place. You get it till it starts to slide down inside. I can't really show you that. It's more by feel now. Hear that little click? Okay. It's not sliding. So we're gonna push it down. There. So this key, we could start this at a slower angle. Get it down in the slot, the spring. Make sure it doesn't hit the thing. There you go. It's in the slot. The spring is all the way down, and it pops in. And then you can put the knuckle. Remember, the little groove for the knuckle has to be face down for that strip that retains them. And you kind of work your thing in there, push it back, get the knuckle in, and get it so it's flat again. See? And now the key will work. And then you look down inside this little hole here. It's hard to see, but you can see that the spring is fully inserted. If that spring is not fully inserted, then you're probably going to be bending the spring, and then you'll have to take it out and redo it. That's why they give you those holes, so you can watch the spring slide into position or make sure it's in position. So now once you got the knuckle in, be careful, you could slide this out very easily, but you should be able to apply it. No, almost no sound whatsoever, but that no clicking. And if you could see, you could probably see the switch is not mangled. Barely see it. Yeah, I can see it. And some of you might want to plug this in. You could actually plug this in and try the keys, but you have to plug the key back in. It's not worth trying until you fix the keys or clean them or whatever and put it back together. So you get the black key in. All right, now, like I said, I started here on the end because it's easier to see. The white key, remember, make sure you get the white proper key. Here's the B key, right? Don't put the C key in there. You got to put the B key in. Again, you got your spring, which is black side up or black side down when you go this way. Now it's a little more difficult because we got to get this white key in now. And the way I find it is I kind of get the key, the spring, at almost like a high angle like that. And then I hook this end down here on the key. I get that in, and then I get the spring, carefully watching the spring, go into the channel. You see what happens? My spring popped up over here. Okay, so I barely saw it pop into the channel. There, that's the view. I can see the spring is now up against the side here. I see it right through the hole, I believe. Oh, no, now it is. There it is. Now it's snapped into place. There we go. And then, no, it popped. No, it didn't. Okay. See, I did that. I got the spring down at the bottom, kind of guided with my finger. God. It's difficult because you don't want to force it. You got to get the angle just right. You hear that spring snap into place, right? And you don't know the key is in right until you get the knuckle in. Again, edge down, get the knuckle in. All right. Very good. And the spring is fully sprung. So it's kind of scary when you hear that little snap and a crack and creak and whatnot. That's just the spring sliding up into position. It's the way they did it. If they had, to tell you the truth, where's my other spring now? Great. Why am I missing a spring? I hate the fact that I have, here it is, no. There it is, see? Towel. All right. If they had shaved this like with a little file and made this smooth, like, in the fillet here of this little, what this little rail in there is doing is this plastic is sliding it around. See how it catches? But if they had made that smoother there, this would have slid very nicely, But there's a reason why they did it. Maybe they want it to catch so you can kind of hold the spring in place and then it slides underneath, It's kind of see, but that little rail down in there is where this plugs in, and it kind of gets caught on it until it slides into place. So it's technique. You got to practice it, and the main thing is you got to be careful. And if this spring does fly out through there, relax, pull the key off carefully. Don't mess with the spring, and slide the spring out. Don't bend it because you'll bend the switch. The switches are, so check your switch first. End piece is easy. Now I can show you exactly what we're doing in the middle. Okay, we're going to put the hook, remember it's black side down in this case, and we're going to get it in that channel, and then we're going to hook underneath there through our hole, all right, and then we're going to carefully hook down this end, hold it straight up. There's a little extra, there we go, we got it underneath, we're good, and now we're going to start pushing down and lifting up here, and hopefully we're going to get here we're going to hear the spring start snapping into place, and there we go. See, I gave it a little jiggle to get the spring down. And then we get the knuckle with the slotted side down. Work that in. Press it, and then check to make sure the spring is fully all the way down. No clicking. Silent. Good. So that's how you get the keys in. Practice or get someone to help you. Helper is good. Lots of light. Be patient. Go slow. Try not to damage those switches. Well, you can't damage the switches, otherwise you're in for a whole nother. Because then you got to flip this thing over. You're gonna have to take this off or unsolder it. Take this whole panel out and flip it over and start working with the keys. And maybe they can be bent. But the thing is, they got to be each one of those break and make switches in there all have to be aligned. If one's a little higher or lower on the bottom, you're going to have different velocity for each key. So it's calibrated pretty much the distance. And even the bend on that little plate that's slammed, if that thing is bent, you're not going to get the same action on the keys. So that's all I can say about that. So let's get to a different angle now. And I'm going to show you how to put it all back together. Now you're ready to put the keyboard back into the case. You have to be careful here. You're going to hold these on both ends, but because you've taken... we're not ready to put it in the case yet. We got to put the strip back in. Don't forget to do that, please. So we're going to very carefully lift this. Try not to pull on the keys because you'll pop them out. But hold it by the metal frame and just pop it back straight up like that. All right. Make sure you're not on any cables. Make sure you're not on any part of the towel because that'll affect the way it sits. See, now it's not rocking anymore. It was on a little piece of the towel at the far end and it was rocking. Okay, none of the keys got pushed down, thank God. Otherwise you got it. Now, remember, see, I'm lining these two holes don't line up here. Oops. And they're still not lining up. Oh, flip it this way. Oh, there they go. They line up. So you got the strip in the right way. All right. Then you're ready to take your screws. Six screws, I believe it was. All right. Screwdriver. And you install your screws in any order for the retaining strip. And again, if you had a knuckle in backwards, you're going to know at this point, but I don't think you can really get a knuckle in backwards. But the keys can slip, so you don't want these keys to fall at this point. Otherwise, you got to go back and reinstall them. And we know how much we hate that. So just don't sock these down too much. Just give them a nice torquing. You don't want to strip them. All right, now we're going to take the towel completely out. And now our keys are locked in. They can't slide down anymore. And now don't forget to put in your keyboard connectors before you lay this back down, because you can't do these after it's laid down and get it all screwed in and you go, oh, I forgot the connectors, my keyboard isn't working. So start with the big connector. You can see there's a notch there, and that goes right into the connector, so it only goes in one way. And I can't really show you this, but basically you hold the connector and push down, and those two wing catches or ejectors will snap straight up and hold the connector in. You don't really need to see that. You'll see it when you put the connector in. The ejectors snap back in towards the connector. Don't force it. If it doesn't go in smoothly, it's not being put in right. There we go. Push it, wings catches snap back in. Now you're ready to put the keyboard back in. You don't have to worry about the keys slipping. Just be careful. Hold it on the sides. Don't drop it. It's heavy. And gently ease it down. Don't hit your power supply. Slide it into place. Make sure you're not pinching any wires, especially down on this end. Ribbon cable's not pinched. Then you slide this back and forth. You can line up. If you remember, I showed you where those wood screws, the holes for the wood screws were. And you slide this down until those line up. There we go. I'm not going to show you on the video, but you'll see the 3 holes line up for where the wood screws go. And once all 3 of those are perfectly lined up, takes a little working back and forth. It's heavy. Then you put your 3 wood screws in, right? Remember, the wood screws are smaller. And then you put the 6 machine screws. The wood screws are there just to align it and get it to the right place so it doesn't rub on the 2 ends, you know, when you close the cover. And the machine screws, what actually holds it down mechanically. So if you get that in, now you're ready to come back and make these connections over here. You might not be able to see them in the video, but you saw them when I showed you how they disconnected. You take the harness, you push it underneath that black hook, bend that down a little bit, and then you carefully plug in. Remember, you should have a wrist strap on. I'm going to ground myself with a piece of metal over here that I have that's grounded. And you want to support the board when you push these in, otherwise you'll crack it. You can crack the contacts or whatever. So you push those 2 connectors in, make sure they're in firmly. Check all your wiring in, make sure there's no pinches anywhere. Ribbon cable will flop down. And at this point, you're ready to close the cover. Carefully watch it, make sure nothing pinches. Put that down. It might slide a little bit. Give it a quick check. Yep, especially on the ends, make sure it's not rubbing. And then you're going to lift it up and you're going to put all your screws back in. That'll hold the top down. And you put the 4 back screws in. Well, actually, you want to put the 4 back screws in, and then you want to flip it up because you don't want this to flip down while you flip it up. So put the 4 screws in, flip it up, and put all the other screws back in on the bottom. I'm not going to show you that because I think you got that. And then when you're done, you're gonna plug it in, and you're gonna run the self-test. I'll show you how to perform a self-test on it in another video. So if you have any questions, please comment. Constructive comments only. Thank you. Any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know it was very detailed. I wasn't trying to entertain anybody. People like, you know, they watch a video for 5 minutes, they get bored. This is an instructional video, and it's pretty much the same way I would have taught you if you were right here in front of me. Of course, I had to do a video. So I stressed a lot of things. I mentioned things over and over again because I can't stress enough how important certain things are. Safety. You know, I'm not an expert at this. I've done the DX7 a couple times, and this is the first time I've done a KX88, but I've done it a couple times. Every time the video goes off, I have to redo part of the video. So that's about it, and thanks. What we have here is just a metal frame, but in here, I'm going to very barely touch them. These are the switches that control how the KX88, and very similar switches on the DX7, is when you push a key, this little piece right here, just next to the spring, pushes down on that switch. And the switch has 2 contacts. When it's up, they call that the brake, because as you press the key, it breaks that contact. And then as you press the key down further, it makes the contact. They have a break make thing. And that's how, so when the key is up, the button is up, the switch is up. And when you push down on the key, you push down on that switch, and then it makes the switch to the other connection underneath. And that's the make. And by measuring the time it took from here to here, with debounce and all that, the KX88 knows how hard you hit the key, velocity. Very clever, just using a little switch. And then after you bottom out the key, you push against this little strip, and that's the aftertouch, which, as you know, can give you, and here's the little flat area that pushes on the aftertouch. And this is a common aftertouch. Some keyboards have an individual aftertouch for each button, and that is possible with MIDI, but Yamaha said, no, we're just going to make it aftertouch for everything. So this is one aftertouch. And I recommend you don't really slam down your keys or push on them too hard, because you could theoretically break this aftertouch, even though there's a nice felt on it. It takes a lot of force to break them, but that's abuse. and you're almost going to break the keys. So anyway, these switches here are very, very, very delicate. If you bend one or push it to the side, you may affect that the key won't play, or the velocity will be wrong. It won't be like, you'll have a key that goes, wow, I just lightly tap it, and it's like it's going loud. And this one goes light, soft to loud. But this one, loud, no matter how I do. And that's because you might have bent one of those little switches in there. And I'm not going to flip this over now, but you'd have to get on the back side. And I have picks when I very rarely, I was hoping I wouldn't do this in the video, but I use these little, I got these at Harbor Freight. Bear with. No, here it is. This one's very handy. And I will, grab these little switchers, and if I push them over too far to the side, I'll flip them back. These all seem to be offset a little bit. I guess that's the way they did it on this one. But anyway, as the key pushes, it pushes on these switches. And you don't want to push too hard. You don't want to bend these. You don't want to, sometimes they get bent sideways and you just pop them down. But we're going to be very careful with that. And I know I'm taking a long time on this because this is critical. This is where, if you don't know what you're doing, you can really screw up your keyboard. So let's just talk about the springs when they go back in. The springs go right in this little slot. Oh, right next to the switch. Isn't that lovely, right? On the DX7, these springs are a little smaller, I think, and because of that, the hooks for the springs are way away from the switches. But here on the KX, they're right there. But look at the slot they put them in. It can get sideways. You can almost get it through there. And sometimes you'll miss this and it'll flop in there. You'll be okay that way, but just don't. If you ever see that your spring went like that into the slot, don't pull up on it. Just pull it straight back, okay? And then make sure you get it into that little thing, that little channel there. Okay, see how that is? Of course, when you're doing this, the black side is down. Okay, because remember, your key is like this with a spring, and then you're putting it down like that. So remember, you always want the black side up for reference, because that's because the spring, see, there's like a slight curve in the spring. They will curve over time. So I wanted to show you that is the most critical thing. Keeping this spring, and sometimes the spring's going to pop out. Like I said, if it pops out, never gradually pull the key out and then slide this out. Don't lift it like this, because now you're going to push on the little switch. Okay, so now let's say we're all done cleaning. Right? Remember, don't clean around here so much. You don't want to get rid of that grease, unless the grease is... Now, this grease is 40 years old. I doubt it's ever been greased, but it's still working. It's not really that dirty. There's still enough lubricant, and they all have the same piano feel. It's like a damper. Think of it that way. Not a string damper.